Attention denizens of planet Earth.
Broadcasting from Carbondale in Southern Illinois' premier comic shop. And now your host, superlative shaman of comic book knowledge, Dan Brown. Flash the match signal in case of emergency for your host with the most on his mind, Matt Morton. Watch out, criminals. There's nothing funny to him about truth, justice, and the American way. It's Commander Harris himself, Scott Reed. And tuning in from the far reaches of no man's land, the mad scientist dream leader, Mike Ho. This is Campus Comics Cast.
This is Scott Reed for the Campus Comics Cast, and I am joined by
Mike Atchison.
Yeah, and we are a crew of two today and hope to be back closer to a full show next week when we get around to the previews episode. We're still recording socially distant thanks to Skype. But Campus Comics, the store is open, so you can check out the store Tuesday through Saturday at 816 East Main Street in Carbondale, Illinois, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Just as a note, Mike No has added posters to the store inventory, and they're actually doing pretty well for him. He's particularly proud of that Ron Swanson Pyramid of Greatness poster. And then I think he's got some additional poster inventory coming in real soon. So this is going to be episode 73, and we are discussing parts 7 and 8 of Batman: The Adventure Continues. And then after that, we're going to take a fairly deep dive into The Watchmen, now that all the regular hosts have had the chance to see it. Thanks to the Juneteenth weekend where they were offering, a lot of streaming services were offering that for free. We really wanted Dan and Matt and Tyler on this episode, but it just hasn't worked out for a couple of weeks, and it was going to be a previews episode next week, so we wanted to have something at least, out this week since we didn't get out an episode last week. So, Mike, you got anything to add before we dive into Batman: The Adventure Continues?
Only that I feel like we should be saying, with the little director's card saying take 3.
Yeah.
The technical difficulties we've been having. So
we don't talk about that.
If anything, we're more well practiced than we were the first 2 times. So
yeah, there you go.
Take it where we can get it. So yeah, the issue that I'm going to cover is Batman: The Adventures Continue, number 7. This issue sports a really nice cover with Catwoman and Batman in the foreground and a very imposing figure of Azrael in the background. The story is called The Darker Knight. It's Knight with a K, and is written by Alan Burnett and Paul Dini with art by Ty Templeton. The splash page has Batman chasing Catwoman over the rooftops of Gotham, with Batman thinking to himself that maybe Robin is right, that he tends to take his sweet time in chasing Catwoman. As Catwoman gloats on having distracted Batman and she's about to escape, Azrael ambushes her and captures her with a bola. At first, Batman thinks that Azrael might be the person that has been stalking him these last few weeks, but we as the readers know that to be Jason Todd, or someone who looks a lot like Jason Todd.
Mm-hmm.
But Batman quickly realizes that it's not him, it's someone new. So as Batman pursues Azrael, who's carrying Catwoman over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes, Azrael lights up his flaming sword and takes out a water tower to evade Batman. And I really feel like there should be a cool name for that sword, but we haven't really landed on what it's actually called. But be that as it may, Azrael and Catwoman end up in an alley where he interrogates her about the location of the shawl, which we later learn is the Shawl of Magdalene, an item with healing properties. And yes, the Shawl of Magdalene does have very closely sounding to the Shroud of Turin that the legend had that Veronica wiped the face of Jesus with and left an image of him on the shroud. I'm sure that wasn't at all accidental, that similarity. So about that time, Batman catches up with them in the alley, and we see Jason Todd again lurking from the rooftop. And, Scott, I still wonder when we're going to get a little bit more than just Jason Todd, kind of looking from afar.
It's kind of like the thread that ties all of these issues together, I think. So that'll probably be closer to a conclusion, or maybe coming up soon.
Yeah, and we'll get to that towards the end of next issue. Anything else to add before I move on?
Not so far.
Okay. No, none of the famous Dan Brown intrinsic background and or toy relevance yet.
In this part so far, I don't really feel like there's anything like there's not a whole lot of like signs with random names or anything like that in the background. So I don't know that there's a whole lot here that we would have would have missed, So
yeah. So yeah, and we've had a couple times to look at it, so I'm pretty sure we would have found it if there was any.
Mm-hmm.
So we pick up again. Batman's internally complimenting Azrael on his quickness and ponders why this guy seems so familiar. And he throws a knockout bomb, hoping that it will work, but it only partly works. And Azrael escapes. As Catwoman gets out of the bola, Batman asks her about the shawl. She informs him that she stole it from a monastery, and she makes a funny remark about needing it to, if it's got healing properties, it needs to be placed over Batman's heart, with a wink and a nod there. Batman tries to convince Selina that she needs to give up the name of the person she stole the shawl for, otherwise the Order of St. Dumas will be on her tail forever. As the police take Catwoman away in handcuffs, Batman gets a call from Alfred, who is being held hostage by Azrael with the flaming sword to his throat. Alfred tells Batman that he needs to come quick. And when Batman does arrive back at the Batcave, the scene turns around pretty quickly from a hostage taking to Batman and Azrael being pretty chummy. Azrael reveals that he's always suspected that Batman is Bruce Wayne, or vice versa. And there's a scene where it seems that Batman, we're told, was part of the Order of St. Dumas at one point, but left before the clerics could give him his religious name. We learned that he pretty much was part of that order to learn certain disciplines and to be trained. So after some idle chit-chat, they get back to the subject of Selina and the stolen shawl, and Jean-Paul, a.k.a. Azrael, says that she'll suffer for taking it, but Bruce tries to talk him down, saying that it wasn't her idea and that he knows who has it. Bruce said he will tell Azrael who has the shawl as long as he forgives Catwoman, and Azrael tentatively agrees to that. And that takes us to our final sequence at the Penguin's Iceberg Lounge, where Batman's paying a visit to Oswald Cobblepot with Azrael in tow and sporting his new Bat-themed armor, which, once again, it seems like we went from 0 to 60 with already Azrael having his own Bat-themed outfit to wear accompanying Batman. So while Penguin admits he brokered the deal to have the shawl stolen, he says he did not have it at this time. It was actually passed on to his client. And just as Azrael was going to take action against the Penguin pulls out his big gun in the form of some giant white bird called Mr. Wing. And that wraps up issue 7, which I might say it seemed like it was a breeze to read. It went through pretty quickly.
Yeah. And I just noticed this time going through, but on the next to the last page of that digital issue, the Penguin has a picture of an owl on his wall, and of course, when we start talking about the Watchmen later, the owl kind of, so it's just all tying together. There we go.
That's almost worthy of a Peteypedia, article or something.
Oh gosh, yeah. It's amazing how sometimes you can read something like this and still pick out stuff. So
yeah, even the animated versions of these comics, you when you read them subsequent times, you notice where you've glossed over previously things that you probably should have caught. So did you like it?
Oh yeah, I liked it. So I think it. We kind of talked about how these are nice stories. There's not a whole lot of of depth. You don't have to know a whole lot about the background of any of these characters. You can just kind of accept them as they're here now, So I think that's great, especially for a newer reader and
Yeah,
and a younger reader. So
right. And like you and I have discussed before, it's when we were kids, you'd pick up a comic and you might read the second or third issue of a 4 or 5 part arc, and you'd have to hope that you can go back and find the back issues. I'm a little bit older than you, so it was a little harder for me because there were no comic stores when I first started reading. Right. So if I missed something that was on the racks at the drugstore or at the grocery store, I was out of luck. But a well-written story, at least in the aspect of making it accessible to a new reader, gives just enough to inform the reader, but not so much to give it all away at once. It intrigues the reader and causes them to want to go back and find more about that particular character. And I think this does an exemplary job of that. I think it's pretty darn good.
Well, you ready to move on to part 8?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So part 8, the Darker Knight part 2. Still written by Alan Burnett and Paul Dini, art by Ty Templeton. I do like that they are crediting both Bob Kane and, more importantly, Bill Finger in this issue on the bottom of those title pages. So I think that's great. Yeah. So we've got our fray between the Penguin's goon, Mr. Wing, fighting Batman and Azrael. That continues here. After a combo move from Batman and Azrael, which I assume they both knew from their previous training together, they're able to separate themselves from Mr. Wing, and they quickly decide that Batman is going to take on Mr. Wing while Azrael is going to chase down Cobblepot. So Batman is able to fairly quickly take out Mr. Wing, and then follows Azrael out onto a balcony where he finds a very beaten and battered Cobblepot in the clutches of Azrael. So Azrael at this point has the information that he wants, so he basically tosses Cobblepot off the side of the building. Fortunately, or maybe fortunately, I don't know. Batman's able to, I guess for more like a kid's book, it's definitely fortunately. Batman saves him. And at this point, Azrael is able to basically just kind of sneak away, sight unseen from Batman. And this scene ends where we have a binocular view of the events that just took place. And we once again have Jason Todd keeping tabs on what the Batman is up to. We transition over to Batman in the Batmobile, and he is speaking to Alfred about what's going on, and learns that there has been a grave robbery, and we don't get the name of what grave was had the body stolen from it, but this is going to be a clue for Batman when we catch back up with Batman. So anything here so far before we switch back over to Azrael?
No, really.
Okay, all right. So we switch over to Azrael, and Azrael is at an ice skating rink, or I assume there's a rink in there. Maybe it's just an ice skating supply place called Iceland. And Azrael discovers in this building there's this body that has the shawl of Magdalene laying over the top of it, and then a blast of ice gets fired over the top of Azrael's head. So we're very quickly able to figure out between the ice blast and the ice skating rink that we're dealing with Mr. Freeze. So Azrael informed Mr. Freeze that the shawl will not work on the dead because the body that is laying there covered up is Mr. Freeze's deceased wife, Nora Freeze, who he has basically through the history of the character been trying to cure of a terrible disease that, initially he had to keep her in suspended animation. And apparently for this character, at least in this time, she's passed on. So Mr. Freeze, we leave that scene with Mr. Freeze pointing his gun at Azrael. Then we transition back over to Batman, who, since he knows that it was Nora Freeze's body that was stolen, is starting to go through all of Mr. Freeze's old hideouts. So he arrives at Iceland and discovers Azrael basically encased in ice. So Mr. Freeze, reveals himself to Batman. Our fight breaks out, and Batman, a little sneaky pull here on the part of Batman, I think, where he kicks over the table that has Nora Freeze on it. And of course, this distracts Mr. Freeze. He's more concerned about his wife's body than what's going on with Batman at this point. So while Mr. Freeze is distracted, Batman uses a batarang and cracks his helmet, right? And then is able to use Mr. Freeze's freeze gun to basically freeze him to keep him from dying. There's the question about how they're breathing while all this is going on, right? So using a sonic batarang, Batman is able to remove the ice from around Azrael's head to basically, kind of keep him alive. And then, of course, he places the shawl of Magdalene on Azrael, as well as a little extra, preventative medicine, we'll just say. So we flash forward from this point. I guess actually anything you want to add through this point?
Just that. Not to steal a pun that someone made before, but that was a cold move kicking over that body. Yeah, that was just as intentional as it was bad. And hey, by the way, I did have some at the very beginning that the big white bird that's the Penguin's basically henchman. That's Mr. Wing is the name.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so in my notes for issue 8, I put down Mr. Bird. So I'm hoping that was my typo and not one that I directly took from the comic.
Okay, yeah. Let's see here. I'll jump back here because I think in the comic he just refers to him, or after the digital issue 7, I think he's just referred to as Wing. He's not even Mr. Wing. He's just Wing. No, it's actually okay. It still says Mr. Wing. So yeah. Okay. I wouldn't spend that bonus money just yet, Mr. Wing. So
okay, all right. I was pretty certain it was me that wrote that wrong, but I thought, boy, that'd be a big glaring one.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised. Calling him Mr. Wing's probably better, just in case someone would confuse him with the Golden Age sidekick of the Crimson Avenger, which no one will, unless they like those old characters.
All right, so we jump forward an unknown amount of time, and Bruce in his suit is there with Jean-Paul in another suit, and they're back at the monastery. And basically, they're returning the Shawl of Magdalene back to its rightful place. And then the two have a discussion, I guess, about the possibility of a team up at some point in the future. And then we get like a little mini epilogue here for part 8, where we have this Ferris wheel, where we have, again, Jason Todd and his binoculars are riding a Ferris wheel, which does not seem to be a particularly effective stakeout place in my mind. But we look through the binoculars and see that Jason Todd is spying on none other than the Joker. So, and of course, if you know the history of Jason Todd and the Joker, this is probably the point where Jason Todd is going to get more actively involved in this story. Now, that being said, we don't know if this Jason Todd has the same history with the Joker, because this is a different, it's a different universe, I guess.
Right.
For way. But overall, I thought these 2 issues were pretty good.
Yeah. I'd say we call it Earth D for Paul Dini.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah. They used to Bob Haney, whenever he was writing these crazy stories in the 70s that didn't fit continuity at all. They somebody along the way, when they were trying to organize all the multiverse, they called that Earth where Batman would team up with the Wildcat, who's from Earth 2, and not that they wouldn't explain it all. So they said finally, well, that happened on Earth B for Bob Haney. So, hey, what's the I'm not really all that informed or knowledgeable about Mr. Freeze. Okay. When did the whole plot device of his wife being sort of his motivation for the things that he does, for his criminal activity? When did that come about, or has that always been part of it?
That has been the case as far as I've been familiar with the character. Now, I haven't gone back and read probably any of the early Silver Age appearances of Mr. Freeze. I just assumed that was always part of his background, that he was trying, or a retcon, probably an early retcon. But I remember playing a Batman adventure game on the GameCube, um, where that was part of his backstory. So we're at least talking about, you know, at least the Batman Adventures time, the original Batman Adventures time frame, and probably prior to that, I would assume. I can't imagine that was unique for Batman Adventures.
His first appearance was in 1959 in Batman number 121. So I just wonder if comics in 1959 would have been that sophisticated to have had that sort of tragic motivation for him. But we'll leave that for one of our multitudes of listeners to let us know, because there's someone out there that's going, oh, these guys don't even know.
Okay, okay. Now I just did a quick search for Nora Freeze.
Yeah.
So her first appearance as Nora is from Batman the Animated Series Heart of Ice, which is actually from 1997. So maybe this all is based off of the Batman animated series. So this is where Dan is cursing his his phone right now as we terribly discuss this. But
well,
yeah,
that'll be motivation for him to get back on the podcast quickly.
Exactly. So he can correct us when we do, the next two here. But so maybe that is her first appearance. So
yeah, it's one of those cases where the TV show informed the comics. Are it's kind of like Harley Quinn and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is like there were some elements of the Batman the Animated Series that were just so universally loved that they have made their way over into the DC universe proper. So
I didn't even remember in the Batman and Robin movie the horrible thing that was. That when Arnold Schwarzenegger played the part, I'm pretty sure there wasn't any reference to a wife or anything like that back then, and so
they maybe cut that out for just for because it's poor filmmaking. So
yeah.
I think if you had that whole story involved in Mr. Freeze in a Batman movie, you would need to have Mr. Freeze just be the one villain,
sure,
and really take that pretty in depth to do it right. So
yeah, and there was a whole parade of villains in that movie.
Oh, there was way too many. Yeah. It had that problem, and the Spider-Man 3 Tobey Maguire movie that was a problem there. They tried to cram too much in there. So
and and Green Lantern, they could have made that movie tolerable if they hadn't tried to fit too much of his backstory into one movie. So
that's one of those you got to watch the director's cut. I think it's better. So.
Oh yeah. I haven't watched the director's cut.
Well, okay, so we have talked, and Dan has pointed out that one of the reasons why they're doing this cartoon or this new comic is so they can come up with new toys, right? So here's my list of toys that we may potentially get from this one. So we got Azrael. I'm assuming that they didn't have an Azrael toy previous. Then we'll get the Asbats toy, which is the Azrael and the bat armor. Mr. Wing. All right, I think could definitely show up as a henchman for some of the bad guys. Now I'm operating under the assumption that there was already a Penguin toy, but who knows? Maybe there wasn't. So I have 4 more figures here that we could get from this issue. That will be the sign that the toys have run their course and they're about ready to run out. So we'll get the bloodied and beaten Cobblepot version. We'll get the smashed helmet, Mr. Freeze. We'll get the Jean Paul in a tuxedo as opposed to in the bat armor, and the sure sign that the toy line is ending is when we will get the Nora Freeze corpse doll. So
that would be a true, that'd be a true jump the shark moment. When
exactly,
they put out that dead Mrs. Freeze.
But we like to kind of grade these issues as we read them, and I've been kind of thinking very fine on this entire series, and I'm still sticking with very fine on part 7 and 8 myself. So
yeah, I'm the same way, very fine for both of them, and I just give myself a margin of error, a half a point each way, just to account for my own inconsistencies of opinions on these things. But overall, yeah.
All right. Let's see here. Well, are we ready to move on to the Watchmen?
Absolutely.
All right. So again, it would be really great if Matt and Dan and Tyler were on here, because I've got a few questions that I want to bounce off of them. So I suspect that at some point, whenever those guys get back on, we're going to give them a few minutes to talk about their thoughts on this series, because this is was such an incredible series, and deservingly received 26 Emmy nominations.
Yeah.
And this is not one of those things where it's just not just because of what's going on in this country right now. I don't feel like they're giving it more nominations than it deserves. I think it probably deserved every single nomination that it got, because there's really not a weak part in my mind. Maybe I guess you could nitpick a couple of things, but overall this entire series is just so strong. So
the only thing I'll say about that, Scott, is that if there is something, even if I thought there was something that was a nitpick, it's more than likely I just didn't understand the reference or what they were getting at, that it just went over my head. So it's so I've yet to come across anything in it that I thought was just not great.
So, all right. Well, what I figure we'll do is we'll just kind of go through the 9 episodes, and I'm sure there'll be some episodes. I want to talk quite a bit on episode 3. That may actually be my favorite episode of the whole series. But I'll kind of give the synopsis of the episode, and then we can talk about it, a little bit or a lot, just depending on how the episode strikes us. And I'm just going to use the little. I'm pulling up my digital version that I got with the Blu-rays off of Vudu, and this is just a little synopsis that they have for each of those episodes. So episode 1 is "It's Summer and We're Running Out of Ice." So in the series premiere, Detective Angela Abar investigates the attempted murder of a fellow officer in an alternate America where police conceal their identities. So this is the episode that really introduced us to, I guess, maybe we'll call it the two sides. You've got I guess really it's the Tulsa Police Department versus the 7th Cavalry. The Tulsa Police Department is either in the yellow masks generally, or they have the more quote unquote superhero-like masks. Then the 7th Cavalry they have taken over, appropriated, I guess is the word that maybe best suits this, the Rorschach mask as the sign for their side. So it's kind of like the two sides. This was a great introductory episode. I don't really have a whole lot of comments about this, other than I thought through the entire episode that Crawford, who was played by Don Johnson, was going to end up being Night Owl, and that of course was not what came to pass. And real quick before I let you chime in, spoilers, right? We got lots of spoilers in this, so if you haven't watched Watchmen yet, then you need to do that soon.
Right, absolutely. It's not something. Some shows you can live with the spoilers. Some things it's like I just soon hear about the spoilers as to watch or read what's being talked about. But
yeah,
this is one you don't want to miss out on it and have it spoiled for you. And I've never been one to say, well, it's months or years old, so how can we spoil it? No, there are always people out there that haven't seen or read something. I thought that this first episode was, like you said, great introduction. It had a great hook. Just showing the level of distrust. I'm sorry, not the level of distrust. The level of the fact that the police had to hide their own identity, even when making a traffic stop, or they had to get permission to use their firearm. There were so many different, and by permission meaning they had to radio in and have it electronically released from the holster in the car before police could use it.
And it was just a taser too. It wasn't even an actual gun. It was a taser. At least it looked more like a taser to me.
Yeah, I assumed it was a gun. I would hope.
Well, it probably is. So.
Yeah, because he was back in the car. Anyway, not to give each step of it away, but there are so many parts of it that really hook you as to the opposition, the conflict between the 7th Cavalry and that's Cavalry with a K, which will give you a quick indication of their white supremacist beliefs. They use the Rorschach mask as they all have Rorschach masks, and that they consider his writings as their inspiration, even though it was bastardized. It was not true. They just used it to their own ends, misinterpreting whatever writings that he had to fit their justify their actions. So I thought seeing a good protagonist in Angela Abar, Sister Knight.
Yeah.
What a great. I mean, Regina King. Anyway, I'm sure we'll talk more about the actors, but this has all the aspects that you want in a first episode to hook the watcher.
Yeah, if you had told me going into this series, if I had not seen a single episode, and you told me that, oh, hey, our main characters are the HR director from The Big Bang Theory and that one lady from Designing Women, I would have written this thing off. So it's a good thing I didn't realize, going in who they were, because it might have, I don't know, it might have sullied me a little bit on, what I was going to get out of this. But they were both so incredibly good in this series. So
yeah, Jean Smart. Yeah. She played one heck of a Lori.
She nailed it.
Yeah, right. Lori Blake
Lori
or
Blake.
Jupiter or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
And I think my favorite character, as far as just part of the cast, not a main character, is the one played by Tim Blake. And throughout the series, I forced myself not to try to do too much history while I was watching. I was binging this over a weekend, and Tim Blake played Looking Glass. He's
Mm-hmm.
the cop with the kind of reflective material mask that pulls over his head completely, and he's got, I wouldn't call it a superpower, but he has a knack for getting the truth out of people without, I guess, technically
a BS
torturing
detector.
Yeah, BS detector. Yeah, that's kind of what I think he called it even. But I didn't know until the end of the series. I started looking up all of these actors, and Tim Blake was in one of my favorite movies, Brother, Where Art Thou? And I thought, that he even has that same, really Southern twang to his voice. So yeah, I just loved his character and his performance.
Well, and you mentioned, I think you mentioned the PDpedia. So as you go through if you haven't taken the time to watch this, or if you've already watched it, you need to go to the HBO website, just hbo.com/PDpedia, PETEYPEDIA, and they have 2 to 5, extra documents and files about stuff that you need to know to help explain what's different about the Watchmen's world. So for episode 1, they call it file 1, but for episode 1, there's a memo that gets circulated talking about the computer and you, because in this version of the world, there is no internet. So computers are just now being used for crime fighting. Another one is research on, there's a film that's played at the beginning called Trust in the Law, that introduces, well, I guess not introduced, but the main character in the film is Bass Reeves, who until this series came on, I'd had zero knowledge of this individual's existence, and they were in fact a real historical figure, and he was a black man that was enforcing law, in the 1800s. He was a sheriff on the frontier, so that was really, really great to know. And then, of course, if I had known this previously, I had forgotten this information about the whole Tulsa massacre that had occurred in, was it 1921? Does that
Yes.
sound right? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That they said that year so many times, it should be ingrained in my brain. But if nothing else, one of the great things about this series is hopefully a lot of people like myself took a few minutes and just did a little bit of research, and about not what the fictional stuff that is going on, but the stuff that is actually based in truth, and learning a little bit about that. So that was just really, really. I mean, I'm not saying that the event that happened was great, but it was great information, and it sparked something in you to do a little bit more, take it a step further. So
absolutely, it's one of those events in American history that was essentially swept under the rug. there are, everybody knows, and it's not by saying this doesn't mean that anyone's anti anything. It's just, there are there are just some ugly parts to our own history. It's a great country, but man, we had some things that we all know, from slavery on through Jim Crow. And then I did not know about this, and I considered myself to be an aficionado of history. I really love history, but it wasn't until 2 or 3 years ago, Scott, that I was listening to a podcast called The Stuff You Missed in History Class, appropriately enough. And I'm like, wow, they started talking about this and how, they had something called Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was a section of the city that the occupants, the citizens there were African American. They thrived. They were, they had nice homes, nice businesses, and there was basically white resentment, and it led to arsons and fire, burned businesses and homes being burned down, and then eventually just a mass riot where hundreds, if not thousands, were killed. I think the estimates gave that about 150 to 300 dead, and they're still to this day looking at maybe digging up locations,
areas of town to try to find some more victims of the event. So right.
And I think a lot of us grew up without this being anything that we learned in any classes in school. So it's time. I'm glad that this is another way that this show and other podcasts maybe, or TV, that is just more of people are learning about it for the first time. So like you said, it's not a good thing, but it's a good thing that we're hearing about it finally.
Yeah. Then there was 2 more files with the first episode. One was talking about the fact that Adrian, I go back and forth between saying Veidt and Veidt. I think they said Veidt in the series, so I'm gonna try to remember to say Veidt. Adrian Veidt was declared dead, right?
Yep.
So that led to the takeover of his company. And then there's one more memo that kind of explains, Rorschach's journal and the fact that some people think it's a hoax, some people think it's legit, and why there's so much controversy about that particular document. So, anything else you got from episode 1?
No,
Okay.
I don't think so.
All right. So, episode 2, titled "Martial Feats of Comanche Horsemanship." So, as Angela relives haunting memories of an attack on her family, she detains a mysterious man who claims responsibility for Tulsa's most recent murder. Elsewhere, an original play is performed for an audience of 1. Right. So, here we basically, are introduced to Louis Gossett Jr.'s character, right, who claims to have killed Crawford. There's like several scenes where he introduces him, or he talks to Angela's like, "You think I'm strong enough to lift 200 pounds?" And he's running around in a wheelchair and such. So, but basically, he is found at the scene where Crawford is hung. And I'm sure that they were deliberately going for the whole lynching symbolism as part of that scene as well. So. I really don't have a whole lot of notes on this particular, but it's throughout the entire series, there is the constant use of eggs. Eggs are like, they're having eggs for breakfast. He boils an egg, whenever he's in her. It's just constantly all the way through. And I think that's one of the things that separates maybe some of your, extremely well-written stuff. That's the theme, and it's not just there just for the sake of, oh, let's put something on all the episodes. It actually, ties into things as it progresses along.
Well, with all of the time anomalies that go with Dr. Manhattan, which came first, the chicken or the egg?
The egg. Mm-hmm.
That was actually even said in one of the later episodes.
Yep.
It's like what begat what, and of course, there was a lot of foreshadowing of the eggs all the way up to the last scene of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
The very end, yeah. The only thing I would say is that, the Don Johnson character, was it Crawford?
Yes.
Judge Crawford, the chief of police.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did not see that coming. It was in this episode that she was searching her friend and confidant, who is white and she's black, and she discovers a Ku Klux Klan outfit in a secret closet in his
Right.
house, and you could tell that really disturbed her and on
Mhm.
many levels, I'm sure. But it also, as a viewer of the show, you're like, well, that sucks.
Yeah,
I
that
kind
was
of had this guy.
surprising. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We learned later why the story was constructed this way, but it really knocked him off his pedestal
Hmm.
that I had him on really early. So,
Yeah. That
yeah.
that's one of the things, and I still, I think I've been through this series now 3 times, and I still don't know if the Judd Crawford, if he was or was not a racist. I haven't been able to make that decision based on the information that has been given to us. Do you have an opinion?
I think that he was at one time,
Right.
and that he deliberately, he and I'm terrible with remembering some of the names, but this was a construct.
Yeah, Keen.
This, yeah,
Yeah,
Senator King.
Keen.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So this was a construct to keep, if you kept the enemy at the cavalry, keep these two opposing forces at each other, it distracted from Keen's motivations.
Right.
And I'm not even going to pretend to try to muddle my way through all that, but there was seemed to be some sort of manufacturing of this situation where he probably was at one time,
Mhm.
and obviously because he had the robes or whatever, and he was in his 60s, I guess, is this character.
Yeah.
So the fact that he never got rid of them completely
Hmm.
um, showed that he maybe still had some nostalgia for that. But I have a hard time believing that he was truly racist at heart, because I think his affection for
Angela
Angela
Able.
or
Hmm.
Emily, yeah, was real.
Hmm.
And they did a good job of showing that. That's why I
Hmm.
think when you find, when all this happens, you're like,
It's
it
more
was
of a
kind of
gut
covered.
punch. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good question. I'm glad you asked that, because I hadn't really thought of it much until you did.
Well, it's to me, it's just like, because like, okay, so the police officer who is nearly killed in the first episode is black, and of course he has to go to his wife. Crawford goes to his wife, and then of course his interaction with Angela Abar, and it's just like, it seems to me that at no point did I ever feel, and who knows, maybe it's just Don Johnson is just too good of an actor.
Right.
But Miami Vice. But anyway, at no point do you ever feel like that character does not care for those people.
Right.
He cares for Angela, and he cares for the police officer that was nearly killed, and he cares for the police officer's wife. You don't ever think that he doesn't care for them as individuals. So
Well, I'm
I
not. You know what? It makes me. I need to get my youngest daughter to watch this. She's in her master's program at UMSL, University of Missouri St. Louis, for school psychology, but she's also minored in sociology, and this would be right up her alley.
oh yeah.
And she would say that would be Judd is a perfect example of someone with implicit bias, someone who does not think of themselves as overtly racist, but still, because they don't think of themselves as such, they ignore their characteristics that is kind of racist. So I'm doing a poor job of telling you how she would probably say it, but from what my discussions with her, I think that's what she would say.
Well, the extra material for episode 2 is just there's a news clipping that the Tulsa police chief was slain. There's a memo that talks about the role of mass vigilantes in pop culture, and then there's a discussion something about the road to reparations, which are called Redfordations.
It's a derivative of Robert
Redford.
Redford's,
Hmm.
he being the president,
Hmm.
as a president that has a lot of these similarities with Ronald Reagan, because we know the original event happened in the 80s when Reagan was president. But Redford, he authorized or signed off on a law that granted reparations for African Americans for slavery. and all the other stuff that happened in the last 150 years or so. That's what I got out.
Yeah. And it was Nixon in the comic. Nixon was still president because Watergate didn't happen.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
it went from Nixon to Redford, and
Right.
Redford's president for however many years now. So because there was no term limits.
Yeah,
So,
you almost forget that this is an entirely different timeline, and
Yeah,
what they called in one of those PDPD memos, they one about computers, they call email L-mail, like email hyphen mail, which
electronic. Yeah.
you know, it could have happened like that. You know, if somebody hadn't coined it email at some point, somebody would have called it L-mail, and that's what we've been saying to this day.
All right. So episode 3. All right. So she was killed. She was killed by space junk.
Yeah.
So following a late night visit from the senator who authored mass policing legislation in Oklahoma, FBI agent and vigilante hunter Lori Blake heads to Tulsa to take over the recent murder investigation. The Lord of the Manor. We didn't actually even talk about that part of episode 2. The Lord of the Manor receives a harshly worded letter and responds accordingly. So part of what's also been going on is that we've been, even though the world thinks that Adrian Veidt is dead, all right, he is actually, still part of this series, and he is basically in this large mansion and being cared for by they ultimately end up being clones, is what they are.
Right, they're Mr. Phillips and Ms. Crookshanks,
Mm-hmm.
and they're his basically his maid and butler.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we're first introduced to him, but they end up being killed off by the dozens
times. Yeah,
and they play various roles, everything from doctors and nurses to game wardens and whatever else that he wants. They're basically his
cannon fodder.
Cannon fodder. Oh my Lord, that's the craziest part of this show was the Adrian Veidt, storyline. Golly, that was crazy.
But this third episode is probably, I think it's got to be my favorite episode of the whole series, just because there's just so many little tiny things that occur here. So again, this is Jean Smart. I think it's the first time she shows up is in episode 3, and she's introduced as Lori Blake. Okay, so you don't know immediately that she's Silk Spectre. You can assume pretty quickly, and of course, what happened was that she took when she learned her true parentage, she took her father's name. So, which kind of seems odd, but we knew from that her mother had kind of eased up on Blake, so I guess she decided to ease up on Blake as well. So one of the things that is quite humorous is what Lori Blake thinks about Cal, who is Angela's husband, and like she even comments during this episode that that Cal is hot. What we learn later on, makes that a little bit ironic. One thing about this, we kind of get introduced to the relationship between Angela and her adopted children, especially the oldest boy named Topher. And that is a very, so there's Topher has 2 younger daughters, and the relationship with the older boy is much different than it is with the 2 daughters.
She's 2 sisters, Topher's sisters, you mean?
Topher's
right?
sisters, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, I said daughters, didn't I? So sorry about that. Yeah, so Topher's sisters. Yeah, Topher's, I'm guessing he's 10 to 12 years old, maybe. Yeah. And so the younger sisters are probably in the, the 5 to 8, maybe as old as 10 range.
Yep.
But I guess, so the reason why these 3 children are with Angela and Cal is the event called the White Night. And this is where I think it was about 3 or so years in the past in the story, the 7th Cavalry had learned the names and residences of all of the police officers in Tulsa, and they had a coordinated attack, and they basically killed all but, 2 that we know of, police officers in Tulsa, which is what led to the act that allowed your police officers to actually be masked. So Angela was an officer, and one of her close friends who had these 3 children was killed during that event. So they her and Cal took over the raising of those children. And Topher was the one that protected the two younger girls by getting them away from, the shooting. But he, obviously has been scarred by this. And
Right.
so his relationship with Angela is much different for that reason. So Angela doesn't ever, well, I shouldn't say never lies to him, but basically whenever he asks a question, she gives him a straight answer. So it's kind of an interesting relationship, and that was, again, it's just something small in this series, but you see that relationship grow throughout these remaining episodes. Whenever Lori Blake keeps a caged owl as a pet, I thought that was funny.
Yeah, that's right.
I
forgot about that.
And do you remember the owl's name? Who?
I was just gonna say Hootie, but it was Who. Yeah.
It's Who. Yeah, because the joke is, ask what's the owl's name? Who? The owl. No, the owl's name is Who.
Yeah.
It was funny too. I guess you really get the first hint about Blake being Silk Spectre, is that whenever they talked about, she had discovered that there was this empty room in Crawford's closet. And she said she's always in the habit of checking out people's closets because of what they found in her dad's closet, So that was kind of good. That whole joke that she's okay. So in this world, they have these little phone booths where you can call and leave a message for Dr. Manhattan, and there's this joke that's just going throughout. They cut to it every once in a while. She's telling the next part of the joke, and it's just good. So
it's one of those. Yeah, the joke is, and I didn't know this at the time I watched it. Even it wasn't until a week or two later somebody had one of these jokes on their little cube wall. It's a brick joke. It's like one of those nonsensical jokes, and it always ends up with a brick being part of the punchline, and that's what she's telling Dr. Manhattan, her ex-lover, on the Mars line or whatever they called it.
The other thing, they had the Andy Warhol picture in her room, and it had Dr. Manhattan and Vite and Night Owl, and she was sitting right at the angle where her face was in front of Silk Spectre's face. There's just so okay, so this episode we also get introduced to Agent Petey, right, who is responsible for the Peteypedia. So Blake is assigned to go down to Tulsa, and they're going to send the entire crew down. He's like, no, I'm going by myself. I'm like, you got to take somebody. So she takes Petey, who is, at this point, probably the least experienced, but he had made a reference to Rorschach in a presentation, and the director had blown it off, but I guess that was just enough to attract Blake's attention that she brought him along. So they're on the plane, and I thought this was a great scene because it really established a relationship between these two characters. They're on the plane, they're flying into Tulsa, and Petey's asking some questions, and she's finally like, what, do you want my autograph? Is that what you want from me? And he's like, he lays it out. No, I have a degree in this, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And basically at that point, their relationship just completely changes, and it goes to there's a lot more respect there than there is just she thinks he's around just so that she can have somebody else around. So I thought that was a really, really good moment. In fact, they take their relationship to the next level, I guess you could say, later on in the episode, because on the plane flight, Petey joked about bringing his own mask. Well, Blake is apparently one of those people where, she's a liberated woman, I guess you could say. So they end up in bed together, but Petey is wearing the mask for that part. So, so at the end of the episode, we kind of get to the punchline of the joke, and it talks about, that brick that you mentioned as part of the earlier joke comes flying down. The idea is that the brick was going to strike and kill God, and she's using that as a reference to Dr. Manhattan. And this is the part where I have a question. So at the end of the episode, Blake leaves that phone booth, and suddenly Angela Abar's car, which had been taken up with what we learned later is her grandpa, is returned, but it's dropped out of the sky and nearly lands on Blake. But the part that I don't get is that it's like she's looked up in the sky, and there's this little red star, which I'm assuming is Mars, which is where Dr. Manhattan's supposed to be. And it's like that star zooms in on her and then zooms back out. So I was convinced at this point that Manhattan was on Mars, just like it had been portrayed in the news, news feeds and stuff that we had seen. So I'm just not sure why that star zoomed in on her. So it's just I just thought it was kind of odd.
I thought, in retrospect, it seems like maybe it was just a red herring. Just so we as the audience still thought, yeah, he was on Mars and he was maybe listening in somehow to what she was saying on the phone. And I'm not really sure. I know the car, presumably, and maybe because I've only seen this series once in that quick weekend where I crammed it all in. I'm assuming that was, Will and Lady True were practicing or were testing the transmitter technology, right? Is that how that thing fell out of the sky, or?
No, well, I think they used they had those crafts that could carry stuff, so that's how they got it. Because remember, it was picked up by a magnet, right?
Yeah.
And I assume they returned it back to the place where it was taken, just dropped it back off. That's what
Okay. I was reading way too much into it. I thought they somehow did the trans whatever you call it, transportation or
teleportation. I'm just calling it teleportation.
Yeah. Right.
But so anyway, that episode was just so good, and they introduced Blake so very well. And it's just like, again, if I had been told that the lady from Designing Women was going to be Blake, I'd have been But
this is also the episode that we first get a little bit more insight into the Lord of the Manor, which is played by Jeremy Irons, which is Adrian Veidt, that he is maybe somewhere being held prisoner against his will in this, even though it's a fancy mansion and he's got these servants. He's out trying to hunt down bison because he needs a thicker hide for some sort of suit that he needs. And I think that's the same time where it was right before he did that, is he had one of his what was the name of the butler, Mr. Phillips. He came back frozen. He somehow pulled him from the sky, and apparently he was outside this dome that's over wherever they are, which we learn later to be Europa, a moon of Jupiter. A moon of Jupiter? Okay, yeah. So yeah, that was fascinating to me, and that Mr. Phillips didn't survive, so he
needed to step it up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It was. I had something I was going to say, and I think it's kind of hard to say that he didn't want to be there anymore. That is for sure.
True.
But I don't think that he wasn't sent there against his will, is what we learned later on. Now, right?
Right. Yeah. He thought it would be great, and then he's like, okay, this is a prison of my own making.
So the PDPDs for episode 3. Probably the big one is there's so many things that are going on in the background of this, and one of them is that there's this American hero story, which is going to tell the quote unquote true story of Hooded Justice, right? And basically and it's primarily from information that the original Night Owl had quote unquote uncovered, that it was thought that he was this strong man, and we're going to learn that is very far from the truth, I guess, is what it boils down to.
Right.
Well, let's see. All right, so episode 4. You ready to go on to episode 4?
Absolutely.
All right, so here we get to meet Lady True. We've been hold on, let me read the little blurb here. So, you don't like my story? Write your own. Reclusive trillionaire Lady True finally enters the stage with a mysterious offer. With Blake getting closer to the truth of her cover-up, Angela enlists Looking Glass for help. Meanwhile, the Lord trains 2 new servants because he has to keep training them because he keeps killing them.
Right.
But anyway, we get introduced to Lady True, and you learn very quickly that she's the type of person that gets exactly what she wants, and she'll go to there's no limit to what she will ask for. So this is one where they suckered me again on her identity. I was convinced that she was the child of the comedian and the Vietnamese woman that he shot. Whenever
exactly,
I knew it, and I was so wrong again.
that I mean, it just seemed like so natural for that to be the case. And maybe that was all by design, though. Maybe they wanted to throw us off a little bit with her,
Yeah.
her being of Vietnamese descent or actually being Vietnamese. And
Mm-hmm.
she's a great character. I don't know what else she's played in this. The woman that played her, which was, I think, Hong Chow is her name.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with
yeah,
her.
but she had the same. Well, I don't want to give it away already, but she had the same demeanor and coldness and intelligence as her father.
Right.
I
Yep.
mean,
And
so
obviously
later on,
super intelligent. So.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and her daughter I thought was a cool character too.
Yes. Yeah. Very, very cool character. I'm looking through, and she was in Downsizing, and but there's nothing in, like an episode here of like some TV series, but nothing, nothing huge. But at least not that I recognize. We get more of Lori Blake being hung up on Cal. I mean, she's making comments about Cal again. How good looking he is and stuff like that.
I didn't put that together until just today when you said it. I remember her saying that, but I thought she was just being cougarish,
Yeah, but nope. Beyond that, okay. Now here is my one original thought for this, and I have not seen this anyplace, and it just occurred to me when I was watching this. So this is the episode where we have this random vigilante that shows up. So there's this guy dressed like in a full bodysuit, and Abar sees him, and this vigilante goes running away, and he squeezes this stuff all over himself and goes sliding through a sewer drain, right? And we never see this character again. Okay, so are you ready for this? This is my theory.
Okay.
That was Agent Petey.
It makes sense because he had the same body frame. But at first I thought, it's like a full size suit of Looking Glass. But I'm like, why would he be? He wouldn't. I think he was somewhere else anyway. But that was a fleeting idea. I never really thought about being Petey at the time. I just thought it was like, oh, that's interesting and completely off the wall.
Yeah, just bizarre.
And then we never see any more about it. Not another. What they called him, like the vegetable oil guy or whatever.
Yeah. But I got two facts. I got two pieces of information to back up my theory.
Okay.
All right. So the first one is, as far as we know, that Vigilante didn't appear prior to Petey showing up in Tulsa.
Okay. All
right. And then the second thing is, and this is after the series is over. All right, and we'll talk about this in the back material. But after the series is over, he quits the FBI, and his whereabouts are unknown.
Yeah.
So. And plus, and here's the third thing. So I said 2, and here's 3. Plus, he was a huge vigilante guy. I mean, he was into that type of information.
Sure.
So I don't know. That's my theory.
I'm with you on that. I totally agree with you. I will be your acolyte on that.
Okay.
Theory.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, it was such a crazy, funny scene where he's like, he wants to dress up like cosplay. He wants to be in that world. He's so geeky, fanboyish, whatever. But then he realizes he's been spotted, and Angela's chasing him down, as Sister Knight, and he's like crapping his pants.
Yeah.
And all he can think to do, how he had the foresight for this anyway, is he squirts all of this like what do you call it? Like not Vaseline, but like the
silicone or vegetable oil or something.
Yeah, baby oil. Yeah, it's like the baby oil. Yeah, he's squirting that all over all his slick suit, and then right before he hits that storm sewer, he drops to the ground and barely slides in through that storm. And you're like, what just happened?
What was that?
But it was visually one of the greatest moments of a movie I've ever seen.
Yeah, for it to not be anything more than what it was. So
yeah, well, it makes me still wonder if maybe at the time they still thought there was going to be a second season.
Yeah, well, I'm hopeful that at some point they will make a follow-up season. It doesn't even have to be in Tulsa to me. I would love to see more of this world. Hey, what was going on in Seattle at this time? Within a few years or whatever. I mean, there are so many things that they could do with this. But I hope that they give it the same level of detail, and that's why a lot of people don't want to see it unless, and Lindelof, I think is his last name.
Yeah.
If he's not involved, you got to wonder about what the quality is going to be like, because man, he just knocked this thing out of the park.
And he's the Lindelof is the I mean, he was a writer on Lost, and there's aspects of this, and I was a big Lost fan.
Until
There's
the end.
aspects of this. You too?
I was until the end, yeah. And then it was
Oh
like,
yeah, I know,
yeah.
I know, yeah. I know. I don't even like to think about it, but it just had the same feel in a lot of ways. And I would have said that even without knowing that Lindelof was a writer of most of the episodes. So good stuff.
And at least Regina King has come out and said that she wouldn't be involved with the second season unless he was involved. So
Yeah.
That's that. Hopefully they can make it happen. I'm sure he has other projects he wanted to work on, but maybe at some point they can revisit this world that they've added to. So
part of me thinks they just figure they've captured lightning in a bottle and they don't know that they could ever top it.
Yeah.
So
but I want them to at least try and come close.
I do too. Hey, they get high grades for effort at least.
You got anything else on episode 4?
No,
okay,
I don't.
Right.
Otherwise, we'll be here for 3 hours.
I still got a little bit more on 4 from the back
Okay.
material.
Okay.
I'll do the raunchy one first.
Okay.
So in episode 3, Lori Blake has a suitcase that she carries around with her. All right, and you only see her open it. You don't see her actually do anything with what's in the case. She kind of opens the case and then closes the case. But there is I don't know, how can I put this delicately? There is a device in the case that is modeled after Dr. Manhattan. And it was created by Night Owl for her because Night Owl was convinced that she still was hung up on Dr. Manhattan while the two of them were together. And so they had the schematics posted for that device. And the name of the device,
that's on the Peteypedia?
That's on the Peteypedia under File 4. The name of the device, and it was actually Matt Martin that I missed this. Matt Martin pointed this out to me. The name of the device is the Excalibur. So
wow,
they were dropping hints about where this was going in the online material after episode 4. So that just I totally missed that. And yeah. So anyway, now, okay, there's only 2 files associated with this one. The other file is they have an interrogation, and it is actually the interrogation of Lori Jupezic. I can't say her last name, which
Jupiter is the what they ended up. Yeah,
Lori Jupiter, but Vite calls her that at the end, because he doesn't know that she's changed her name. But anyway, it's the interrogation of when she was caught. So what happened is that she and Night Owl actually stopped the Oklahoma City bombing from occurring, the Timothy McVeigh bombing from occurring. But they were captured. During that event. So what happened was she took a plea deal and she agreed to become part of this anti-vigilante task force. But Night Owl declined and thus was put in jail. So that's why she's not in jail, but he is. That's why we don't see him in this episode, because he's still serving time. And that was one of the things that they used to convince her to take this case, was that, hey, the younger Senator King, whenever I become president, I had the power to pardon people, so we can maybe get your Night Owl out of its cage. So but that was just that was just a really, really cool how that all tied in, and what the events that they used to and that was like 1995. So
yeah, I'm just glancing at it here, and it's got the same snarky humor that she has in her in her part that she plays. But she is very funny to hear talk. She's got an edge to her that won't quit.
Well, episode 5, you want to we're starting to get pretty long on this. You want to do 5 and then maybe call it? Or
yeah, we'll do that, because it's up to you, but I feel like we'd be rushing. We're over
an hour. We're over an hour already on this episode, so let's do 5 and
I think that's a good idea. Let's do 5, and then we'll pick up. Maybe the other guys will be able to be on.
Yeah, and then they can recap what they thought, because they probably wouldn't want to I've enjoyed just going through this episode by episode. So
yeah, me too.
So episode 5, Little Fear of Lightning. So this is the origin story of Looking Glass, is at last revealed as the truth behind the greatest hoax in American history. Far away, the smartest man in the world plots a daring escape. All right. So Looking Glass. Oh gosh, I've already forgotten his name.
His actual
the character name.
Wade Tillman.
Wade, there we go. So Wade is Looking Glass. So we learn, that he is he's a big believer in alien incursion. And the reason why, he's terrified that it's going to happen again. Of course, he was in New Jersey when the event took place in New York, and there was a psychic event that was associated with the whole physical thing of the giant squid showing up in in New York. So he's been scarred by that. He was basically a little Mormon boy who was there, way out of his element, because I think he's from Oklahoma there, and
they were doing city. I think there was a Mormon retinue going to do mission work in New York, and that's why, and they were on a little outing at this carnival. So go ahead.
Yeah. So anyway, that was basically it. It was. I'm not a George Michael fan, but the choice of the song "Careless Whisper" for that whole scene with him, where he's at the carnival.
Yep.
It was just so perfect, because literally one of the lines in that, I had to go look it up to get it exactly right, is "calls to mind a silver screen" is one of the lines in that song.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So whoever was responsible for the music for this series deserves such major kudos. It was just they just little tiny things like that. I mean, they had to have spent so much time just polishing this series just to get every little thing.
So did you look at the lyrics and figured that out?
I heard it, and then they mentioned silver screen, and then I just went and checked the lyrics just to make sure that I got the quote correct for it. I didn't want to.
Wow, dude, that's where I think that doing an episode by episode commentary, watching it and then that would be fun. That would be so much fun.
But we get his whole backstory and why he is like he is. And you learn about his fears, and he has a support group for people who have been through the situation like he has. And of course, somebody infiltrates his support group, gets him to where he learns that big event that has basically shaped his entire adult life was all a hoax.
Yep.
And of course, it's going to kind of devastate a guy who is like that. So, but the episode ends with a bunch of 7th Cavalry going into his home, and you don't know for a while if he survived or not. So we're all, it would seem silly for them to do that episode and not have him come back at some future point. Because then it would have totally just been a filler episode, but spoilers, he does come back. So
yeah.
I don't know, anything else on episode 5 you wanna talk about?
No, like I said, I don't know where to stop and where to end. If I did.
Okay.
Or where to start and where to end. You're right. It shook him to his core whenever he, the whole thing with the that being a hoax and he was. Yeah, it's hard to even expound on that.
So they the 3 files that are associated with episode 5. There's another follow-up memo from Petey about all the things that are wrong in that American Hero story show that's going on. That's kind of interesting, the mistakes that are there. And then we're going to learn here pretty soon that the entire thing is, almost completely wrong. There is a note about something called nostalgia, and this comes up in the next episode. So what nostalgia is a drug that was designed by the True Corporation to help people who were suffering with memory loss, and probably specifically Alzheimer's, to be able to retain their memories. Well, the problem is that people would take this drug and they would experience their own memories again, but there were some bad side effects if you were taking somebody else's nostalgia, and this kind of became a black market drug. So it's like the one big quote unquote failure for the True Corporation was this drug called nostalgia. But they have this pamphlet about the drug as one of the extras for that episode. And then the final extra is another pamphlet called Extra Dimensional Anxiety and You, and this is for Looking Glass as part. I think this he maybe even hands out this pamphlet to his support group that he's the head of, because he at this point is pretending to be somebody who has it all together when in fact he's probably the most terrified person in the room. So. So, but anyway, so man,
I love the tagline for this nostalgia pamphlet. Let your best yesterday lead you to a better tomorrow.
There you go.
That's creepy as all get out.
Yeah, and you've got the little True, logo down there in the lower right-hand corner.
Yeah.
So.
Oh my.
All right. So okay. So we've got 6, 7, 8, and 9 left to talk about. So I don't know anything from the first half of this series that else you want to mention at this point. You'll have a little bit of time to do a little bit more research for the second half now. So
I will. I just want to. I need to go get well, I won't have time probably to watch it all again, but I need to go out and buy the Blu-ray. I think I'll save it for next time because it's in, I think, episode 6. I had a question about Angela, and her treatment. So yeah, I think that's all in the future.
All right.
But, it was in episode 5. I'm sorry. It was in episode 5. One of the craziest things I thought was Veidt was tossing out. He was launching with the great big one of those siege breakers, the big medieval looking machines, throwing the bodies of the dead.
Trebuchet.
Yeah, trebuchet. There you go. Good. Nice. Throwing them out through the dome that apparently you can go out, but not. I mean, it contains, but yet it's high enough people wouldn't be able to escape. But he's throwing these bodies out there. Then he throws himself, which we find out that's what he was trying to get, a spacesuit made out of bison hide and all that stuff. He throws himself that's tethered out to outside the dome on Europa, which obviously is freezing cold, and he arranges all of the bodies of those clones that says "Save me, daughter."
Yeah, or something. Help, daughter, or save me, daughter,
Help,
or something.
Daughter, or something like that.
Yeah.
Which, at the time he was doing it, I had no idea what he was doing, but we learned later what he was.
We
trying
learned
to
later
do.
on, yeah, what that's all about. So, this is just trivia, and it actually is with episode 7. But so the actress who played young Angela Abar, and I don't have her name. Let's see if I can find it real quick. She is, as far as I know, there are 2 actors for DC and 2 actors for Marvel that have played 2 different characters in their respective universe. So in Marvel, you've got Chris Evans, who's played, Human Torch and Captain America. You've got Josh Brolin, who's played Cable and Thanos. All right. So I realized this first. The actress who played young Angela was in Shazam as one of the younger version of
the Lieutenant Marvel.
Yes, one of the younger Marvels, the Marvel family.
Right.
Yeah, but she was one of Billy's foster sisters.
Right. Okay.
Right? Okay.
Oh.
And then the actor that plays Cal, and I have his name here, Yahya Abdul Mateen II.
Mm-hmm.
He also played Black Mantis in Aquaman.
I knew he looked familiar.
He's been in some other stuff too, but
he was so he was the
best part of Aquaman.
Okay, you're breaking me down. He probably was, but anyway, his character in this TV series was such a calm, good-hearted person that it's funny how good actors can completely change the way you look at them when they're playing different parts. They transcend. It's okay. That's amazing. I can see it now, but I did not know that.
And it's crazy. You know what? He's been in the entire series, and we've hardly talked about him.
Yeah.
But he's been there the whole time, and we've not talked about Cal hardly any at all, other than
Right.
what Lori Blake thinks about him.
It's not until like episode 7 or 8 that we will have
Yeah,
a lot.
all of a sudden it's like,
He will
but
goes
again,
from being in the background to being in the forefront.
exactly. So, all right, so that's probably a good note to end on right there. So,
Absolutely.
all right, so we're probably in 2 weeks. We'll probably wrap up our discussion about Watchmen. Episode 74 is probably going to be a previews episode. Well, almost certainly going to be a previews episode. So it'll be a couple of weeks where we get back around to this topic and wrap that topic up. And hopefully we can get Matt and Dan and Tyler on with us, and that may just be what we focus that episode on. Let them talk about the first half of the series, and we can all deep dive through the last 4 episodes. So, Mike, if somebody wants to track you down, do you want to provide any information about that?
Sure. Well, the only somewhat public social media I have is Twitter, and that's Mike Atchison5. I do not produce, I only consume. But if someone tries to at me, I'll go, oh my gosh, somebody just added me. I'm going to have to reply. So, yeah, that's the only way. I've got Facebook, but it's due to my jobs in law enforcement in the past. I've always kept that pretty private. But I'll say that if you ever want to reach out, you can also go through the store's Facebook page, or anything connected to Campus Comics. One thing I wanted to say before we cut off, though, is that Ozymandias poem, and I know he becomes more of a bigger character later on, or at least Adrian Veidt. I wanted to tell everybody, when you get a chance, look up on YouTube the recitation of that poem by Bryan Cranston, and it'll give you a new level of appreciation for the character Ozymandias. So
yeah, just search for Ozymandias and Bryan Cranston. It'll be your first hit, so it won't be hard to find.
Right. That's all for me.
All right. So, and let's see. So, speaking of Facebook, also, if you're enjoying the podcast, hey, it'd be great if you jumped on Facebook and like the Campus Comic Cast page. And of course, hopefully, if you're listening to this, you're subscribing. So, choose your favorite podcast app, click subscribe. That helps, maybe eventually getting this a little bit more widespread than what it is. If you want to talk to me, Scott Reed, you can find me at burgcomics.com, BURG comics.com, and we will talk to you next time.
I am the Eggman.
There we go. All right, so we can put that in at the end.
Cuckoo, ka-choo, cuckoo, ka-choo.